rice, and a wild grape. And that's it. So think about what your diet would be like if you were living on American foods. Probably healthier than what I'm living on now, but that's okay. Okay, now let's go to the old world. We're going to take a look at the Ethiopian area. The banana tree is in part indigenous there. Barley, castor bean, flax, onion, sesame, sorghum. If you then go to the Central Asiatic region, now this is where Kazakhstan is. For the younger people, you remember Borat? Okay, this is where he's from. Actually, I visited that country, it's beautiful, okay? And Borat has no relation, okay? But what comes out of Central Asia? Almonds, apples, apricots, the broad beans, fava beans, chickpeas, flax, pears, spinach. You go to the Mediterranean region. Now again, remember, this is the cradle of Western civilization, so what kind of crops did they have? Well, they had asparagus, beets, cabbage, carrot, chicory, hops, lettuce, oats, olives, parsnip, rhubarb, and wheat. Now what you're discovering is the great trading routes existed long before the empires did, didn't they? Because their crops were much more diverse than what I just listed. You go to the Indo-Burma, that's where you get amaranthus, chickpeas, cotton, the old world cotton, eggplant, we'll come back to that one, mango, orange, rice, taro, yam. You go to Asia Minor, which would be the Middle East. This is where you get alfalfa, again some of the almonds, barley, cabbage, cherries, date palms, flax, opium poppy, onion, pistachio, pomegranates. If you then go into the Malay region here, again you get the old world banana, breadfruit, we're going to come back to that one, okay? Coconut, ginger, grapefruit, the yams. And then if you go to China, you get the adzuki bean, apricot, buckwheat, sorghum, the old world sorghums, peaches, radishes, rhubarbs, soybeans, and a few others, okay? So now you have an idea of where the world is when it comes to its crops and where the centers were. So now, I guess I'm still going to do this. It's easier for me to see the slides at the same time as you do. Okay. I don't know if you can see this well, but you see this big, should be purple, that's an eggplant, right? Okay? Now that's what everybody sees as an eggplant in the grocery store, right? Okay, if I told you every one of these were eggplants too, would you believe it? In India, there are 300 species of eggplants, because that's where they originated from. They're all edible. They are amazingly diverse. You go out and you look at them in a field, and it's like, whoa, okay? I mean, you just can't imagine that. And it's kind of nice to get out of our sort of comfort zone to see what something else is. In India, they're binja, and it's a huge vegetable for them. Now, a couple of things about what the centers of diversity mean for us. Okay, virtually all food comes from plants that are not native to the U.S. Okay, so that's the first thing, okay? Very little of the food we produce is actually native here. Secondly, perhaps no country has benefited more than we. The other exception would be Australia, because Australia has no really economic plants there that are used for food by the sharing of agricultural plants. And I always get a little bit concerned because many growers that I work with feel badly when I work with overseas groups because they think we're giving our technology away. It's a little hard to do when your whole wheat industry is based on things coming out of the Middle East, okay? And our agriculture is dependent upon foreign germplasm, which is why almost the first aspect of our ambassadors, when the country was first formed, had on their duties collect plants, okay? Every ambassador went out to do that. Now, let's talk about some all-American foods, right? So let's talk about the things we eat. I mean, what's more American than a BLT, right? Okay, well, let's see what that all-American food is. Well, you got your potato chips, right? Okay, where'd they come from? Peru, right? Okay. You got your bread, well, that's the Middle East, right? Okay. You got your tomato, which is the New World. You got your lettuce, which is the Middle East. And that's the all-American food? Now, if you think about it, what's more American than apple pie? I mean, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but we're now talking about bedrock Americana, right? Okay, you get your apples from Central Asia, Kazakhstan, okay? Think about that next time you think about Borat. They gave us the apples. If you get your sugar, if it's sugar beets, it comes from Europe. If it's sugar cane, it comes from Asia. If you get your shortening, that's from China, mainly from soybeans. If you get your flour, that's Middle East. And the cinnamon comes from India and Sri Lanka. Now, there's nothing more American, or it's nothing as American as apple pie, right? Okay, just remember that. So I think that's the kind of things that I find interesting. And we do benefit immensely by these. Now, as we said, the domestication occurred in the centers of origin. And that's, could also be the centers of diversity. But the interesting part that's there is it's because people were familiar with the crop. It was the constant contact, okay? And, the original peoples had a great proclivity for trying things out. So that's where they were domesticated. Now, agriculture began with hunters and gatherers, okay? Now, if you think about that, one of the things that happens is, and I don't want to use the present gender bias as we relate to who would hunt and who would gather, but I think you should understand that by and large, a lot of agriculture probably started with women. And it's a real honor to have the daughters of the people that funded this lecture to be here, as well as a celebration that one of the founders of this lecture series is a woman. And I must admit, in my tenure, I worked with the first woman who graduated with an advanced degree from North Carolina State, and worked with the first woman who received the honor of being a fellow in the Crop Science Society of America. Okay. Now, the other thing is, crops spread better east to west than they do north to south. And there's a reason for that. It's photoperiod. Okay, it's daylight sensitivity. It's much easier to expand going in the same photoperiod zones than it is to go up or down. You also tend to have more oceans and deserts, things like that. And the other thing you have to recognize is that explorers and pioneers always took their plants with them. Always. You didn't leave home without them. Okay? And again, you see, it's interesting to me to see how much of this is basically in the temperate zones or the equatorial zones. But basically, you take that part of the world, and that's where almost all your crops came from. And it also means, if you think about this, and I want you to think about this. Now, what did we say? I didn't tell you this, but I should mention, Ethiopia is where coffee originated. Okay? Now, how many of you drink Ethiopian coffee? Okay? How many of you drink Colombian coffee? Okay? It's a New World plant, right? I mean, it's the one where most of the bulk coffee comes from. If you're drinking Ethiopian coffee, you're upscale for sure, because there's not that much, okay? Rubber plants. Where are the great rubber tree plantations? There's some in Brazil, but where are they? Southeast Asia, right? And one of the main driving forces in World War II was to find a rubber substitute because the world's supply had been captured by the Japanese. Okay? What you're seeing, and where are the great wheatlands? Well, it's not the Middle East. It's places like the US, Australia, South Africa. When you take a crop away from where it originated, you can leave the pests behind. And therefore, you can have tremendous production in the absence of the pests. Okay? Yeah. We'll also talk a little about that. Probably the best example of leaving the pests behind. Anybody remember the Irish potato crop? Everybody remember when the pests caught up to the crop? The Irish potato famine? That's an exact example of what happened there. Okay. Now, the history of agriculture, I think, is wonderful, and I really like this. This is a papyrus scroll. It's sort of the current textbook in the Egyptian time on how to produce wheat. And what you see is they're sowing, or they're harvesting the wheat, probably sowing it. They also have date palms because it was a diversified agriculture. This happens to be a woman milling wheat, and what caught me on this is from a museum in Alexandria, is you see many things where the king is killing a lion, okay? Many things where you see the queen doing something. You almost never see anything where people are actually doing something